Get to the table!
Here's Johnny. You're gonna need a bigger potion. Wow, so serious. Roll out.
I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 124 for July 2nd, 2015, and there is no fate but what we make for ourselves, or what Paramount Pictures makes for us.
Yes.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
And I'm JD Duran.
Thanks for joining us this week, everyone. We've got an interesting show lined up, to say the least, if I do say so myself, as Genisys is finally upon us. And no, I don't mean the 70s progressive rock band that Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins were a part of. Which is a pretty good band, by the way. Check them out. But that's beside the point. We're obviously talking about the latest in the non-stop Terminator franchise. The fifth one, to be exact. Terminator Genisys,
No. The fourth one, Brendan. Remember what we said on the extra film? Salvation doesn't count. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, we got to make that clear. And actually, on that note, let's quickly turn out that we just had our extra film where we talked about the entire Terminator saga. In retrospective, we went through all four films, which is a great discussion. So on that topic, just wanted to throw that out there. We had a lot of fun with Mr. DJ Valentine from Simplistic Reviews.
It had to be DJ.
Of course, yeah. He came in the last minute for us, too, which I thought he was a great sport for that. But without him, it just would have been boring.
Probably.
Yeah. But anyway, before we move on, JD, what's up?
Oh, man, the usual. I'm excited for the 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
And, last week I was talking about how, I didn't have a great weekend at work. So Monday was a little interesting at work. But, I got through it all. Everything's good now. And
good.
I'm ready. I'm ready for a long weekend, though. Just relaxing. And I got a lot of time to edit these shows and put them together. And it's going to be glorious.
I bet you're looking forward to just edit all weekend.
And I can take my time. I can do 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, sip on a margarita,
Or you could just procrastinate and do it all on the 4th of July. How about that?
Or I could do that too, yes.
But I'm with you, man. I am so stoked for the 4th of July weekend. I need a break. I need a break. I need a break where I can actually also sit down and root for our good old USA women's
on Sunday,
team.
I believe, right?
They play on Sunday, and apparently I'm driving back from DC at the time the game's going to be on. So I'm either going to have to stream it on my phone in the car or DVR or something. Yeah. Which is going to be kind of a hassle. But I need this weekend, man, because like you, I had a pretty rotten day today at work. It couldn't come soon enough. We were stuck trying to finish this budget for a client that needed to get done today, and all the information was wrong. Yeah. And in the middle of the day, my boss's boss sent an email to his entire team saying, have a great weekend and holiday, guys. You guys can leave by 3 o'clock today. And we're like, well, we can't leave by 3. This thing's got to get done. So I'm in the office till 5, and then trying to get this thing done with my teammates on my team, and then I've got to rush to catch this movie that we've got to review today, which I'll talk about later if that only added or took away from my frustration, but I think that should be fun. Yeah. But before we get going, we've got an awesome guest on our show today. We've got Colin from the site Not Yet Rated. Colin, thanks for joining us today, man.
Hi, guys. I'm happy to be on. It's awesome.
Great to have you. Before we get going, tell us a little bit about your site, Not Yet Rated, and where we can find you guys on the internet.
Yes, so we just made Not Yet Rated a few weeks ago, maybe like over a month, and our goal is just to have a bunch of people from Twitter and that people know and people like, and we want to review movies that people understand, because a lot of critics, when they write out their movie reviews, they're very overcomplicated and they use big Harvard words and stuff. We want to be very simplistic and easy to get through, and we want to make sure that it's for the fans and not just something that looks pretty. And so that was the basis for what me and my buddies Aaron and Dan came up with. And so thus Not Yet Rated was formed. We have movie reviews, we got some editorials, and we got a lot of great writers on the site, and it's really looking good so far.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was actually reading through the site right before we started the show, and I was reading your Terminator Genisys review, actually, and
yes.
I noticed that. I mean, it was very easy to read, easy to follow, and, just following you guys on Twitter, it's a blast because the way you guys interact, and you guys are always on there, which is really fun, so creating really fun conversations. So if you guys aren't following Colin or his site, I would highly recommend it. It's really terrific stuff.
I completely agree. I was doing the same thing too, JD. I was reading through some of your reviews, Colin, and I found myself reading the entire review and getting through the entire thing and not stopping a quarter of the way through saying, what the hell are you talking about,
You're
man?
pulling up a dictionary. What does this mean?
Yeah, exactly. But I love that unbiased view you guys bring, which I cannot wait to get that viewpoint and perspective on today's show, which I think could lend for some interesting discussion. We shall see how it goes. So it's great to have you, man. Look forward to what we're going to be having to talk about. And speaking of what we're going to be talking about, it's Terminator Genisys Day, as we're going to be reviewing the latest film in the nonstop Terminator franchise. And going off of that, for our top 3 today, we'll be doing our top 3 favorite catchphrases in movies, as the Terminator franchise has been known to turn out quite a few catchphrases. I think that it's only fitting to talk about those for this one. And lastly, for our discussion segment, we're going to be returning to the InSession Film Showdown. And with this year being kind of themed with long-awaited sequels, we've had Mad Max Fury Road, we've had Jurassic World, now we have Terminator Genisys, and apparently there's a Star Wars movie coming out this year,
Something
too.
like that.
It might do pretty well. I'm not sure yet. But with a theme like that, let's do a long-awaited sequel-themed showdown. So JD and myself are going to go head-to-head battling the Jurassic franchise versus the Terminator franchise. And maybe we'll ask you, Colin, to be kind of the mediator and the judge for that to see who comes out on top. But I think it's going to be... we'll see about that. We didn't even tell the listeners out there what we're supporting, which one. So we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah, it's a surprise.
It's always a surprise. That's the beauty about our show. We're full of surprises, good and bad.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. But it should be a really fun show and a lot to talk about. So with that said, guys, let's get into it.
And here we go.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 124. Theoretically, this is going to be a good review.
And theoretically, we'll be back.
Hey, what's wrong with this picture? Nice night for a walk, eh?
Nice night for a walk.
Wash day tomorrow. Nothing clean, right?
Nothing clean. Right.
Yeah, I think this guy's a couple cans short of a six-pack.
Your clothes. Give them to me. Now.
You won't be needing any clothes. I've been waiting for you.
All right, Terminator Genisys, the fourth or fifth film in this franchise, depending on your viewpoint. Fourth, I think, is much more better. It's directed by Alan Taylor and stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jason Clarke, Emilia Clarke, Jai Courtney, Mr. Blandman himself, and a few other people that we'll probably get into as well. So, Colin, we'll toss it to you first, man. What do you think about this latest Terminator Genisys?
It's fine, I guess. Like, it's okay. Like, it's definitely not as bad as people are putting it out to be, I think.
Yeah.
It's definitely fun if you like the first two, especially in the beginning of the movie. It starts to lose you a little bit at the end, but overall it's just an okay movie. Like it's passable. Like there's nothing special about it, but it was okay.
Essentially, it's not 25% Rotten Tomatoes bad.
Yeah, it's definitely not that.
Yeah. Which I obviously the first thing I did was look. Okay, what are people saying on Rotten Tomatoes? Oh,
yeah,
okay,
it's getting trashed. Yes.
Yeah, it's getting ripped apart. But let's see what we all think. So, and we'll probably have some interesting points to bounce off of that, Colin. But how about you, JD? What did you think about this one?
Well, I'm really right there with Colin. I think serviceable is a great word to describe this, but I think a lot of this comes down to expectations. Because for me, I didn't watch any of the trailers. I had pretty low expectations. And coming out of it, despite some of the acting, which we'll definitely get into, I quite enjoyed the first half of this movie. Like Colin was saying, how it ties into Terminator 1 and 2, I thought was really neat. And it made me pretty nostalgic like Jurassic World did for me. And a couple of examples is like the future battles that we see, I felt had a very similar aesthetic to the first Terminator, which is great because Salvation, a film I'm going to pretend doesn't exist, completely ignored that altogether.
Right.
You have Arnold being Arnold, which is always great. And I like that scene where we see the younger Arnold and he's addressing those three punks or whatever, and then that's when we see the older Arnold come in, as we've seen in the trailers a million times before. That scene held up for me on every level. I really like that, and I saw the potential with this movie, absolutely did. And thematically, Brendan, it's really neat because a lot of this film sets up those notions we talked about on the extra film of choosing your fate. And there's some really neat voice narration at the beginning where Reese says, there is no fate but what we set for ourselves. And I like how this set the groundwork for something that could have been neat. However, like Colin was saying, the second half of this movie does start to lose you. There's a twist that happens that you foresee coming, even if I didn't see the trailers. And I didn't see the trailers. I know that was something a lot of people complained about, is how they spoiled that twist in the trailers, but I didn't see it. But I felt like immediately they set that up. Like I knew what was going to happen. And them alerting that so early on really lessened the impact of it. And ultimately, I just was disengaged from the movie once that happened. But overall, though, I still had fun with this movie. Like Jurassic World, it's not super great. You can even argue it's a bad movie, but the nostalgic and the fun works for it. And so I still had a good time despite the flaws.
Yeah, and this I guess sort of 3 for 3 on this one. I think I had less fun with it than you guys did, and I'll get into why. But the first thing I gotta agree with you is especially the first act of this film, yet alone the first half. Like I wrote down in my notes, the first 20 minutes of this film are fabulous.
Yeah,
it's incredible. It's really good. It's really good. In fact, I could say, in fact, if you want a great experience, leave after the 20-minute mark, and you've got a great, you've got a great fan-made short prequel.
You see, and it's kind of funny because a few years ago when The Lone Ranger came out, I made this exact same argument about the last 20 minutes of that movie. If you just watch the last 20 minutes, it's one of the best movies of the year. And it's kind of the similar here. Just leave after the first 20 minutes and you have a solid summer short film.
Exactly, because it actually arguably can tell a bit of a complete story. But I feel like the first 20 minutes was like the pitch that they gave the Paramount Pictures saying, this is what
we got this.
We got this. Well, what do you got next? Well, let's just throw a bunch of time stuff in here that we don't even understand ourselves. But here's the thing, the movie does, especially in the second half, it gets very convoluted with the time travel. I don't think it's quite as convoluted as some people are making it out to be. I think there are some consistencies there. There are obviously some plot holes because I think they tried setting themselves up for a sequel that might not even happen now. But the thing is, like, the second half of this movie, I just started getting mad. And it's not because of this convoluted timeline that many people argue erases what happened in the previous films, which I'm not sure is really true. I think the reason why I got mad is because I just feel like the production companies who keep purchasing the rights for these films and other films in these franchises, they don't know or understand what stories they want to keep telling or even how to execute it. I think the execution of the second half of this film is really my biggest problem with it, and it has to do mostly with the writing and not the story writing, but the dialogue and the performances, because every character in this movie, including Arnold for me, was obnoxious and annoying. I thought the writing forces every other line in this film to be some kind of joke within the dialogue, and it almost tries pacing itself like it's a comedy, and that's okay. That's okay on paper, but the jokes have to work. Not one of the jokes worked for me in this movie. It all felt forced, and I think Arnold was given the worst of all these jokes, and pretty much all of them fell flat for me. And then you've got J.K. Simmons in here who has to provide some other comic relief, and I think he's kind of wasted in this film. There's another actor that we didn't mention. Who might it be? I'll just leave it at that. But who's not really given enough to do, and then there's more to that I think we can talk about later. But the other biggest problem I had with this film was kind of going into the purpose of why I felt like it was being made, or at least what the movie thinks it's supposed to be. And I think it's trying to be this kind of like quasi reboot in certain ways. Like it presents this alternate scenario of this franchise, or an alternate timeline, obviously, which I'm actually okay with. I don't mind that they go that route. It leaves some things unanswered, as I mentioned, that they want to do for an upcoming sequel, which may not happen. But I don't think it's as convoluted as many people say. I think there are just some plot holes here because there's nothing that does come in fruition. But for a reboot to work, and this is my problem, is that I don't think it should rely on the audience needing to see the previous installments, like being 1 and 2 specifically. Because if you look at an example like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, I think that's a great reboot for a franchise because it honors both the old and the new who can enjoy it simultaneously. Yet the new don't really need to see the old to really get what's going on. That's not really the case here. And I feel like it defeats some of the purpose here, which kind of begs the question for me. Who specifically was this movie for? Who was the target audience? And that's what left me scratching my head most of the time by the second half of this film, because I didn't feel a certain passion or reason that these writers wanted to make it other than the production company told them to. But having said that, the first half of this film has a lot of good stuff in it. It really does. And I'm very torn here. But I think I enjoyed aspects of it like you guys did, but I think I liked it a lot less than you. But I think that's just where I am.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting points that you bring up, and quite honestly, it was kind of hard to follow all of them. But I think when it comes to the reboot part of it, I can kind of see where you're coming from, and at the same time, I'm not as bothered by it because it's an obvious continuation. So as a sequel, much like Jurassic World, it was a sequel to movies that came out a long time ago that for me, it works. And they tie in very heavily to the first film in the first 20 minutes, as we've been talking about. And the latter half of the movie is obviously them trying to set up further sequels. And you were also talking about, Brendan, how they left out certain plot lines and it kind of left these plot holes, and that was probably intentional as they're going to fill in those gaps in later movies, although I would probably consider that a big criticism of this movie in some ways. But for me, it wasn't a huge issue because I just saw it as a continuation. The humor aspects of it, I think, worked for me more than it did for you. In fact, that was probably a big reason why I enjoyed the second half of this movie, because like you, I agree that the writing wasn't very inspired. It was convoluted, not because of the time travel, but because of all these other elements they're trying to throw in here. And not every gag worked, but I felt like Arnold especially was the standout. I think in terms of acting, a lot of it was pretty bland, but because he can do this in his sleep, I think he nails it really well. In fact, of all the other actors in this film, and I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but I think Jai Courtney does the best. Now, I don't think that I don't think he's great. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's great. But in terms of comparing him to Jason Clarke and Emilia Clarke, I felt like he was much better than those two. Not that he's super great, but in comparison to those two, I think he does stand out. But Arnold, for me, is definitely the guy that carries this movie. And I guess the last thing, I'll toss it back to Colin, is I agree with you, though, Brendan, about the time travel aspects of it. I felt like the plot was pretty easy to follow for the most part. I think the biggest questions I have, and you kind of touched on this in your review, I think, Colin, is that there is someone that sends Colin back to save a 9-year-old Sarah Connor, but we never find out who. Like, they never answer that question. They never even go back to it at all. And so there's this mystery element, and there's even I'll say a bigger villain in this movie that's never really fleshed out either, and they never go back to answer those questions. And for me, that is where it gets a little confusing. But when it comes to the time travel aspect and the multiple timelines, I felt like those were decently well explained, and I felt like they even had fun with, even though they're throwing out all these big terms and stuff. I don't think you have to know those terms to understand what's going on and to have fun with it. And that's where they use the word theoretically a lot throughout the movie, and I thought that was a pretty fun gag. I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, I agree with some of the things you said, but you lost me with Jai Courtney, because I've defended Jai Courtney. I think he's been okay in movies. He was terrible in Die Hard, but he was okay in like Jack Reacher and other movies. But in this, he was fine acting-wise, but as the character Kyle Reese, he wasn't Kyle Reese. Like Michael Biehn was
I agree
Reese.
with that. Yeah, and that's why, like, in context, like, because I'm a little bit the opposite of you. I hate Jai Courtney. I think everything he's in is terrible. But in this one, I will defend him a little bit, because in comparison to everything else that's going on, I feel like he's a stand-up. But I agree with you. He is not the Kyle Reese that we know and love, though.
Right.
He just, like, physically also, like, why is he all buff? Michael Biehn was kind of, like, skinny and sweaty, and Jai Courtney's all ripped.
It's because he has to take his shirt off.
Yeah, exactly.
That explains that.
Hey, I'd do the same thing. I'd get ripped for this movie.
I don't want to see that.
I don't either.
But I think I have to agree with you, JD, that of all the performances in this movie, Jai Courtney is not the worst. I would say that.
That's probably the best way to say that.
Yeah, the best. I mean, and as far as acting goes, you know, even though the jokes for Arnold didn't work for me, you may still have to argue that he technically gives the best performance in this movie. But when you have Arnold Schwarzenegger giving the best performance in your movie, that's I don't know what you make of that. But I mean, I haven't seen Maggie I haven't seen Maggie like you have. So apparently he can be a good actor sometimes. But I'll leave you to be the one to say that. But the thing is, I'm getting at is you've got two great actors like Jason Clarke and Emilia Clarke, who's really good on Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
and they. And they go so overboard with their performances to the point that they're eventually caricatures of these characters that they're playing. At least that's how I felt. They were almost,
especially Jason Clarke. Oh my God.
Yes. He much worse than Emilia Clarke, and I think that's where it just felt too over the top for me, to the point that it was. I don't know if I want to say cartoonish, because I feel like that might be a compliment, because I think the movie's trying to be kind of cartoonish, but they do go overboard with their performances, that it was distracting for me, and that's where, and even their butt of their jokes, mostly Emilia Clarke, don't work for me. They just fall flat.
Didn't Jason Clarke seem like he was high through a lot of this movie? Didn't he just feel like he was so bland, like he was never fully sober through a lot of this acting? Like he just showed up, he had a paycheck, and was probably drunk half the time or something. That's what it felt like to me. Like I don't know if he was ever fully there on set.
You know what? You've got an interesting theory there, because you look back at the previous 3 Terminator films. Each John Connor that's been portrayed in all 3 of those films have either been very bland like that, or just seemed like they didn't care. And Jason Clarke, I think, joins those ranks.
I completely disagree, actually. For me, I think that Jason Clarke was the John Connor that they've all talked about in all the other movies, that he's supposed to be the leader of this resistance that people want to go to war and die for. Especially in the beginning, we see that like he's the best of us. He's a great guy. With Christian Bale, he was just whiny and annoying, just like Edward Furlong, I guess. Sure. But it's just, I don't like John Connor when it's Bale. And for me, I really liked Clarke as John Connor, and I found him super likable, at least in the beginning.
Yes. And I will agree with that. And that's why I love the first 20 minutes of this film, because that's where I felt like we were kind of leading. Like I felt like this whole saga was leading to when this moment of the war was going to end up becoming this timeline's present, if you will. And I liked seeing John Connor and that relationship with Kyle Reese kind of forming. But when it gets to that twist, and you know, for those who haven't seen the trailers, lucky for you, because most of us have. But when it gets to that twist, I feel like that's when the performance definitely kind of flips on itself, and that's where it negates it for me.
See, and I'm Sorry, real fast. I'm going to be a little bit different than you guys. In fact, I'm going to be a lot different than you guys. And I was trying to say this a little bit more ambiguously in my opening statements because I didn't want to spoil anything. But I did not find Jason Clarke charismatic or endearing or engaging at all in this movie, especially at the beginning. Like the very first time we see him, he's saving a young Kyle Reese, and that's not a spoiler. But the first time that they really spend a good chunk of time talking to each other, Jason Clarke to me there was so bland, and in his eyes I could almost see it. Like I knew right away. And I was someone that didn't see the trailers. I didn't follow the marketing for this film. All I knew is that there was a twist. And immediately looking at his eyes in that scene, in this moment where he's supposed to be the leader that we all want to follow and love, I knew right away. I knew absolutely right away. I felt like he was pretty terrible. Although I agree with you, Colin, in terms of his actions, like that speech he gives is great. That speech is fantastic. And the action stuff is fine too, but it wasn't overly charismatic. Like if it wasn't for the dialogue he was saying, like the actual words, I wouldn't necessarily be inspired to go to battle with this guy if it was me.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I see your point as well, but I guess when it sounds like what Colin and I are judging, I guess, is kind of on the surface of his performance, or not just a performance, I guess, what the character is kind of representing. And it was kind of an aspect of John Connor that I guess we quite hadn't seen yet. And that was what I enjoyed. I enjoyed seeing that. But yeah, he wasn't charismatic, but I don't think he needed to be. I thought it was serviceable. I guess, yeah, serviceable is probably the right word for it. But I guess in a serviceable film like this, something that serviceable comes off as better than what it probably could be. But it worked for me. It worked for me. And I think Jason Clarke is still a fine actor, but just not so much in this film, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I didn't really buy much of it myself, but to each their own. It's fine. And like I said, I mean, I like him as an actor too, Brennan. I don't get me wrong. I mean, I really liked him in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I just wish he had more to do there. But, for me here, he just wasn't doing much. And then later on in the film, especially, I felt like that's when he really becomes that caricature that you're talking about. But, and even Emilia Clarke didn't really do it for me either. And that was disappointing because I really like her on Game of Thrones as well. And to me, she just never really got anything going with that character. And it's disappointing because we all love Sarah Connor from the first, or at least the second one especially. So, and for me, it felt like maybe she was thinking about it too much because she has her moments, but it, never really got going anywhere.
Yeah, and you just kind of jumped the gun for me because this is the next thing I had written down that I wanted us to talk about is the portrayal of Emilia Clarke as Sarah Connor, which I think is arguably the biggest shoes that have to be filled in this film because Sarah Connor is arguably one of the top 2 greatest female action heroes of all time. The other one being Ellen Ripley. Yep. The other one being Ellen Ripley, and then the third one arguably being Furiosa from Mad Max Fury Road now. But I definitely wanted to talk about Emilia Clarke to see if you guys thought that if she was able to take on that duty and that role and give it something that it needed. It sounds like, JD, you're saying that she didn't, and I would agree with that. I don't think she does this character justice if you want to compare it to what Sarah Connor was perceived as in the first 2 films and that arc that she went through. Yeah. But it's not, even if judging her performance in this film on its own and just in the world of this film as it is, it still doesn't work for me because she's given the butt of all these lame jokes, and it's like they constantly keep on reprising this joke, like did you guys mate, and her reaction to it, and it's. I
kind of laughed at that scene.
I never did. I never laughed. I rolled my eyes every time that she had to tell some kind of butt of a joke like that. And I was just, you just shut up. I couldn't do it, and I think maybe it's more
the joke wasn't so much about her acting though. Like, for me, the joke works because of the circumstance and Arnold.
Yeah, I think the performance has to be able to make that joke work for me, and her performance made it feel forced and unnatural and unnecessary, and that's what I felt like her whole performance was. But Colin, I wanted to let you kind of jump off of that regarding Emilia Clarke as the great Sarah Connor, if you agree with us, or if you actually thought she did a better job than we're actually saying.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell because in this alternate timeline, of course, we're not going to get the same Sarah Connor that we
That's
saw
a
in the
good
first
point.
Terminator or the
That's a
second
really good
Terminator,
point.
because the Terminator went back to when she was just a baby or a
She was 9
12-year-old
years
or whatever
old.
she
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Yeah, and so we're not going to get the innocent and scared Sarah Connor that we got in the first one, and we're not going to get the hardened and badass Sarah Connor that we got in the second one, because she hasn't really gone through what she went through. Everything has changed this time. So for me, I didn't really compare her to Linda Hamilton that much, just because everything is completely different in the circumstances. But I think that Emilia Clarke did a good job with what she had. Sure, the humor didn't work all the time, although I did like the mating thing. But
Yeah, sure.
I think she was just fine. Like,
Yeah.
it could have been a lot worse.
And you make a really good point, Colin, that this isn't the same Sarah Connor, so she doesn't have to be the exact same. And I wasn't necessarily comparing her to the one we see in the first two. I mean, to a degree, but you're absolutely right. I think for me, though, just even in this film itself, she's not overly exhilarating to me. I mean, you're right in the word that she is fine. And to a degree, I'm okay with that, because there's some father-daughter elements in this film that are introduced, and because she's fine, I think it works okay enough. And especially because of Arnold and the way that Arnold delivers some of those threads, especially later on in the movie, I think it works there, but it wasn't anything that like overly compelled me, I guess. And maybe because I love her in Game of Thrones, I was expecting more, and maybe that's unfair for me to do that. It just didn't exceed any expectations, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm definitely less on her than you guys are. I didn't think she did a good job pretty much at all. But that, I think if you're gonna add all these elements of humor and that fatherly stuff, I think you have to be able to get an actress that's gonna be able to make me believe it too. And
it certainly could have been more robust with a better actress, or at least a better performance. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, but Colin, you do make a fantastic point though, that comparing this to Linda Hamilton's portrayal of Sarah Connor may not be a fair way to do this, but I think just judging on its own, though, it personally didn't work for me. But for the sake of time, though, let's quickly get to final thoughts before we move on. So, Colin, any final thoughts, and then what grade would you give Terminator Genisys?
Okay, so Terminator Genisys is a fun time if you like the first two, especially in the beginning, but just like halfway through the movie, if you've seen the trailer, you know the twist, and ever since that happened, it just kind of loses me. Right when the quote-unquote villain is explaining his plot, it just doesn't make that much sense, and then you have no idea what's going on, and then it just became boring in the third act. Like, it didn't make me angry, like I think you said, but it just kind of bored me, and I'm just sitting in the theater just kind of waiting for it to end. But I did like a majority of it, or maybe not even a majority, maybe just above half. But it's just an okay movie. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, so I guess that's a C+ or C. I don't know math.
We don't know either. I actually think if you really want to get technical, that'd probably equate to like a B- on our show. But
Okay.
We'll just we'll go with it. I don't.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
I'm making it up as I go along. How about you, JD?
Well, Brendan, we got to talk about this film thematically a little bit. So
no, we don't.
Well, okay, I do anyway. So on our extra film, we were talking about how these films explore these notions of fate and choosing your own destiny. And, I was even talking about how I liked in Terminator 3, how they explored the ideas of inevitability, which I really liked that juxtaposition from the second film, especially. And in this one, they get back to those ideas of choosing our own fate and even fighting urges of vulnerability and that trap of inevitability. And I think they even call out blatantly Terminator 3, which I actually quite enjoyed in this movie. There's a scene where the main villain, I'll just say, he has a line where he says, "My existence is inevitable. Why can't you accept it?" And then Reese has a really great line that I won't spoil, but it eventually gets back to those ideas of why we fight and choosing hope, which Charles Xavier in X-Men Days of Future Past eloquently put that it is the most human power. And I think Hope does have a lot of power. And so for me, thematically, I like how they literally almost punched Terminator 3 in the face with that kind of a rebuttal. For me, I quite enjoyed. Now, it could have been a little bit more potent if we had better acting, if the script was a little bit tighter, if the third act made sense at all. In any way, I think that those themes could have resonated a little bit more, but I do like that they get back to that. As much as I liked them going in a different direction in Terminator 3, ultimately those ideas of hope I do like. And on top of that, there's other ideas of family, which again, I said I liked enough. Again, it could have been better, but it worked for me. And then the twist, I just got to mention real fast. Once that happened, that's where I really became disengaged from the movie, and I didn't find it interesting at all. And like I said, I saw it coming. It felt like we just had to have a villain of the week, so to speak, and maybe the producers thought that we wouldn't see it coming, but then they spoiled it in the trailers anyway, so I don't know why they even felt like they needed to do that. And especially for that character, I know it's a risky move, but some people like that character, and it just didn't make sense to me. Maybe on paper it worked, but in execution, like you were saying, Colin, it's boring, it's predictable, and it's so confounding to me. But, overall, I think the film does a good job of bringing me to my Terminator nostalgia that I like. I like the Arnold character as the T-800. The first 20 minutes is awesome. Some of the gags worked for me throughout the movie. I just wish that we had better acting, but what are you going to do? It's Terminator, I guess. Maybe I'm expecting too much. So, I'm going to give this, I'm with Colin. I'll go with B-.
I was literally like doing the Rocky Balboa dance when you were talking about this film thematically, because literally when that ending happened, I quickly went to my phone and went to my notepad and just quickly wrote down the middle finger to Terminator 3.
It is. And I'm perfectly fine with that. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you guys go back and check out our extra film when we did our Terminator retrospective, myself and DJ Valentine were not a big fan of at least the execution of the ending of Terminator 3. I mean, I do like the idea of it, JD, and you talked about the idea of inevitability. I think as it is, it's a good theme to talk about, and it's a nice juxtaposition, but I think the way it executed it, I found it superficial. So it was nice to see that middle finger to which I thought, and they made it so blatant.
Yeah.
But I do kind of agree with you guys. there is some fun to be had here, especially in the first half, and especially the first 20 minutes. I think it's almost kind of remarkable. It answers a lot of small things that we never really thought of. For example, why Kyle Reese always landed on his back after he traveled through time. It goes into some of those little details. I thought, that's neat. Yeah. That's neat. But then, which is very ironic, you guys are talking about the second half being kind of predictable and then boring, because this movie tries to veer so far off the path with this alternate timeline and everything that it's so ironic that it becomes that predictable side. It almost makes it feel like the filmmakers didn't have much faith in this, and I feel like at the same time, the production company, I felt like, didn't have faith in the final product because they gave away this big reveal in the trailers, and I think that's why they did it. I think they did it because they're like, we may have a stinker on our hands, guys. We got to give them something in the trailers that can make people want to see it.
Let's give them the whole movie right now.
yeah. Let's just do that. But I don't think it's a stinker, as many people are saying. Yeah. But I don't like it as much as you guys do. I will say it's probably I'd rank it 4th out of the 5. If you have to include Salvation, I would say it's definitely better than Salvation. But I think I still enjoy aspects of Terminator 3 a little bit better. But I'd recommend this movie just for most of the first act, and I say you're done. You're done.
You can leave after 25, 30 minutes or so.
Yeah. Right. I think you've got a great short film, because everything after that, it made me mad, as I mentioned, because I can't really understand who this film was really for and what they were really wanting to do here. I didn't really get the passion or the inspiration or the purpose, and it's kind of frustrating when you got 2 great films like the first 2 in this saga. Yeah. That they're not really living up to anything. I guess I have to compare it to those, but as it is, I would give this film at best a C+. That's kind of averaging between like an A- for the first half and then a D for the second half.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So
if you've seen any Terminator movie ever, you know the ending of this movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
The same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
It really is. It really is. Which I mean, it could be a bad thing or a good thing depending on what you want out of this film. But I mean, that's beside the point. It's not as bad as people are saying, but it's still not a very good movie. We'll leave it at that. But if you want to hear more of our thoughts on this, we will have a full review on our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm.
And if you agree or disagree with our takes, you can let us know by leaving a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/InSessionFilm. You can tweet us at InSessionFilm, leave a comment on our Google Plus page, or simply email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
All right, the InSession Film Top 3 is next, and we will be discussing our top 3 movie catchphrases.
I'm tired of these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane.
Well, what are you doing podcasting on a plane for? That's your problem. But for everyone else, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The InSession Film Top 3 is brought to you by our good friends at the First Time Watchers podcast. And Brendan, of course, we just got done talking about Terminator Genisys. And just like that movie and a good T800, the First Time Watchers podcast is one well-oiled machine.
Very nice. I like it. Or you can say they're just a dump of liquid metal.
You can say that too. They transform into different things and...
Which I'm not sure what that would mean.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
That actually sounds pretty bad, so take that back, Tim. I'm sorry. But anyway, they're a great supporter of our show, and they're definitely a podcast. You guys definitely need to check them out. Hosted by Tim, Walter, and Hermano. And as far as a Genisys is concerned, they are the Genesis of their movie knowledge. I'll give them that.
Absolutely, and their banter is amazing. It's very entertaining. You gotta love it. Just like... well, at least the first Terminator films, those are solid movies, just like this podcast.
I think solid is an understatement. I think these guys are awesome.
Yeah,
are absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Just like those first two films, and it's because their banter is amazing. I mean, they're so entertaining,
so good.
And what's so unique about them is that every week they'll pick out a movie that they've never seen before, watch it, and discuss it, which gives it really this fresh perspective that helps them set themselves apart, which I think is great. They'll also discuss other movies that they've seen, trailers that recently came out, and give their thoughts there. That's where they get to rant a lot, and that's where it's most entertaining.
Absolutely. And they also give out some great movie recommendations at their end of the show that I would pay attention to. And speaking of recommendations, they recently had their top 5 movies of the year so far podcast that come out this last week featuring moi. I was on there at least for a little bit, so definitely go and check out that show. It was really great. But overall, as we've been talking about, it's such a smart show. It's fluid and so easy to listen to. They just have a ton of fun, and I know that you will as well. So Brendan, where can you find these guys on the internet?
There are a couple ways. You can check them out at firsttimewatchers.blogspot.com and also hit them up on Twitter at firsttimewatchers and also on Facebook. Just search for First Time Watchers.
And go subscribe to them on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave them a review and let them know that Skynet is not after them. I promise it's absolutely worth your time. Again, that's the First Time Watchers. You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 124. And now we are going to be going over our top 3 catchphrases in film, which there is a ton of them. So I don't know if this was as hard for you guys as it was for me. But before we get going into it, Colin, did you have any criteria that you looked at to pick your list this week?
I I just didn't want to do the obvious ones, so I kind of went for ones that I don't think you guys are going to pick, but and it was kind of hard because what really constitutes a catchphrase instead of like a one-liner, but I think I figured it out, and I think I got a good top 3.
Okay, very good. Brendan, what about you?
I'm in that same boat. Obviously, I do a little bit of research to see what our examples are out there, but I wanted to focus on ones that are personal to me, meaning which ones do I find myself saying every now and then in real life. So those are the ones I wanted to focus on, being my personal favorites that I've been known to say to people, and they look at me like, what the heck are you talking about? But that's beside the point there. Yeah, that's what I wanted to focus on. Personal ones for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I also picked personal ones that either I say a lot or has some sort of resonance for me. And the other big thing with my criteria was wonderfully articulated by our good friend at Bubbleweet on Twitter, as I threw out the question on Twitter for this. And he said, my criteria would be this. It has to be repeated either within the film or across multiple films, and it has longevity. And I think that's a really great way to articulate the way that I was looking at it. So that's where I'm sitting with my criteria. We'll start with you, Colin. What is your number 3?
All right, so my number 3 is personal, just like you guys, but for a little different reason, because my uncle is actually in the movie, and it's Never Give Up, Never Surrender from Galaxy Quest.
Oh, how interesting.
Yes, so I love Galaxy Quest for many reasons, because it's a great movie, but also because my uncle's in it, so it has so much more to me.
I can imagine. Makes me jealous.
I remember when I was little, he would put like little notes in my lunchbox when my parents weren't home, and it would just say, never give up, never surrender. And I always loved that quote, and whenever I see Galaxy Quest, that always makes me smile. Although my uncle doesn't say the line, it's still great, and I just love that movie so much.
I need to know, who the heck is your uncle in that film?
He's Quellic, and he's the alien that dies, and it gets Alan Rickman all upset, and then Alan Rickman goes and kills a bunch of people.
Oh my god! I freaking love this movie. This is the best Star Trek movie never made. I
and it's
love
getting a
Galaxy
TV show
Quest.
now.
Oh, I did hear about
that.
I did hear about that. But that's awesome. That's a great story there. But that's a great quote too. I completely forgot about that one. Honorable mention. Honorable mention.
Nice. Yeah, I mean that is a personal pick. You weren't kidding. So, very good stuff. All right, Brendan, what do you got at number 3?
So my number 3, again, kind of personal, and this is something I think I said on our show a few times before. It's a quote from the great Forrest Gump, and it's not one of the more popular ones. It's something that he says at the end of one of his little stories, and he just simply goes, "That's all I have to say about that." But
Nice.
I find myself saying that every time I finish some kind of thought, even when I'm out with friends and I'm explaining something, and all of a sudden I'm done, it gets quiet, and I'm just like, that's all I have to say about that. I say it all the time. I say it all the time. In fact, I probably say it more than my top 2 on this list, but for that reason, because it has such replay value on my talk button, it's got to be put on here. It's got to be put on here. I got to quote the great Tom Hanks in this one.
That's a good one. My wife will absolutely love that pick as well. So very good stuff. For my number 3, speaking of my wife, this has direct correlation with her because my wife doesn't watch a whole lot of classic movies, and for some reason she hates black and white, and I don't know why. It drives me nuts because I wish she would like what I like, but who am I to expect that?
Hey, opposites track, man.
That's true. But anyway, I did get her to finally watch Casablanca. So my number 3 is Here's Looking at You, Kid. And it was really interesting because I would say that to her all the time. And because she's a Disney girl and there's that one movie ride or whatever at Disney World, and they have that line and Casablanca is featured there and whatnot. So she knew of it, but had never seen the movie. So that was part of the reason why she was willing to go and watch it. Plus I say it to her all the time. And I bet you throughout the viewing of that, I said it to her at least 100 times, at least. But it was this really intimate moment, though, between us. So it's a special moment, and a big reason why I picked it for this list is because it's just a thing between us now that is funny and endearing, I guess. But
so I got a question. So she hadn't seen the film before. Did she know before watching it that was the line from that film, though?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, because of how it's done at Disney. And so she knew it was from that movie, but she had never seen it within the context of the movie. And she had obviously no idea what was going on. So she just wanted to see it and see how the line was used in the film. That was her biggest intrigue to watching the film. So
sure. Because I always think it's very intriguing and very like neat when you know some kind of movie reference, but never know what it's from. And then when you watch, and then when you watch that movie, and then you notice it, oh, it's from this movie when it actually happens. I was hoping you were going to get that kind of cathartic moment out of her, but no, guess not. Yeah. But I hope she enjoyed it because it's a great film.
She didn't, but she at least liked. Well, and here's the thing: like if you know my wife, that's not like a huge. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. Like that is kind of expected, but the big thing is it's not the romance. She liked the romance and she liked that line, but the whole plot overall in general she couldn't follow. And I think part of it is she wasn't engaged because it is black and white and it's an old movie and she just doesn't get into them. So I think she just struggled with that in general. I would say her not liking it, I wouldn't put a whole lot of weight on that. So
fair enough.
You know, her favorite movie in the world is The Notebook. So that's who I'm dealing with. So.
Fair enough. Let's. Okay. I love you, Brandy. But let's stop right here.
No, I love her too, but she's just a whole nother person when it comes to film. But all right, let's move on. Colin, what do you got at number 2?
I almost picked that quote from Casablanca too. So
it's a good one. Mm-hmm.
It's great. But for my number 2, I was looking at baseball movies because I'm a huge baseball fan.
You better not steal my line, Colin. You better not steal it.
I think I might have because it was between these two. And my honorable mention is You're Killing Me Smallest from The Sandlot.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But my from Field of Dreams. This is definitely my favorite baseball movie, and it's just an all-time classic in my opinion. And just hearing it gives me chills. Just thinking about it gives me chills. And I just love that movie so much. It really resonated with me. And like just me having a catch with my dad and then him having a catch with his dad at the end, it just gets you all choked up. And it's a great movie. And you can't not think of this line when you think of that movie.
Well, God damn it, Colin. And I'm just going to go ahead and skip you, Brendan, because this is my number 2 as well. Fine. And you perfectly articulated it, Colin, because I felt the same way. And the whole line is predicated on his father and that relationship that, you know, he talks about throughout the film. And then, of course, there's that big catharsis at the very end. And every time he says it, and I felt like I talked about this last week on the show, Brendan, I can't remember, but I was trying to explain this to my wife too, because she had never seen Field of Dreams and it was on TV. And I was trying to tell her about that moment and I choked up just talking about it. And that scene wasn't even playing. And then by the end, I was just a mess. So I completely agree. Such a wonderful, wonderful film.
Annie, what was that?
What was what?
That voice just now. What was it?
We didn't hear anything.
If you build it, he will come.
I think we're forgetting the greatest baseball quote of all time actually comes from Tom Hanks again, and that is, "There's no crying in baseball."
There is when it comes to the Field of Dreams, though.
Yeah, that proved him wrong, I guess, so you guys are right.
Yeah, so I like Tom Hanks, but he can be wrong from time to time. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, Brendan, what do you got at number 2?
So my number 2 is one I do also say pretty often, and it's kind of like my version of, if you guys remember that Chris Farley sketch where he's the motivational speaker and, you know, living in a van down by the river.
Yeah,
and
sure.
one thing he always said was "Lottie frickin' da." But anyway, for some reason, I use this quote as my version of my Lottie frickin' da. And it's the great quote from Die Hard, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker."
Yeah, sure.
It's just like every time someone throws a sarcastic comment on me, I'm like, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker." but it's one I use often. But just the quote on its own, it's so much fun. This is my fun pick. And it's not. It doesn't have the poetry of some of these classic films, but that's not what this list is about. But I feel like a quote like this just fully defines the kind of character that John McClane was and why he's so relatable. Because he's humorous, he's sarcastic, and he's human. Yeah. And that's what makes the first Die Hard especially. And I think it's been a hit or miss franchise like the Terminator franchise, but especially in the first film, it's great, and I love how Alan Rickman even acknowledges that he says it. What did you say to me? Yippee-ki-yay. Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Well, Brendan, I'm glad that you picked this because this is a good honorable mention for me, but I'm glad someone has it because we got a lot of comments on Twitter, especially, of a lot of people saying this, and so it had to have been mentioned, so I'm glad you went ahead and did it for us. And I agree for all the reasons you said and everyone said on Twitter. So it's wonderful, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Colin, what do you got at number 1?
And again, I was going to pick that one as well, especially for my number 1. But I knew one of you was going to pick it. So I wanted to do something a little different.
Yeah, that's fair, yeah.
You know us too well already.
Yeah.
But my number 1 is, maybe you guys have, maybe you don't, is You Can't Handle the Truth from A Few Good Men.
Oh,
A Few Good Men is one of my favorite movies in general. I just love it so much, and there's so many quotable lines. It's just a great script from Aaron Sorkin.
If Lieutenant Kendrick gave an order that Santiago wasn't to be touched, then why did he have to be transferred? Colonel, Lieutenant Kendrick ordered the code red, didn't he? Because that's what you told Lieutenant Kendrick to do.
Object! And when it went bad, you cut these guys loose! Your Honor, you had markets inside a phony transfer. Your Honor, you doctored the logbook. Damn it, Captain! You coerced the doctor.
Consider yourself in contempt.
Colonel Jessup, did you order the code red?
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom.
And just the monologue from Jack Nicholson that he gives at the end when he's on the stand, and you can't handle the truth. Who's gonna stand on the wall? You, Lieutenant Weinberg. It's just such an amazing sequence in the movie, and I say this quote all the time, out of context and in context, and it's the quote you obviously think of when you think of the movie, and it's the best. It's one of my favorite movies and quotes of all time.
Yeah. I really think this is going to sound bad at first, but let me finish. I think this quote gets too much credit. The reason why I say that is because it detracts from all the great other stuff that Jack Nicholson says during that speech because people forget about it.
Yeah.
It's that, I mean, I would argue that whole thing he says in that whole scene should be the freaking quote. It's a great scene. It's one of the best scenes of the 90s.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's what I was going to say, Brendan, is it's a great line and it's a powerful line. And at the same time, like the way that the Tom Cruise character leads up to it and the way that it just kind of spills out of that character there on the stand, like that whole scene is just really, really well handled. So, and it's of course a line that's going to stick out for a good reason. But yeah, that whole scene is incredible. So,
oh yeah,
very good.
And even when Jack Nicholson is being arrested, he has a great line where he tries to attack Tom Cruise and he yells, "I'm gonna rip the eyes out of your head and piss in your dead skull."
Yeah.
It's just the best. Like, just that whole movie would be my quote if I could. But,
yeah, only he could deliver such a line like that.
Oh, man. And so good.
Yeah, he's incredible. All right, Brendan, what do you got at number 1, man?
So, my number 1. It's my number 1. I have not really had the chance to say this in real life to someone yet, like, seriously. But I cannot wait until I get the opportunity to like really take advantage of someone that I just hate and say this line to them and just rub it in their face. And JD, you should know me well enough that I can't make this list and not quote my boy Paul Thomas Anderson.
Of course, yeah.
And I am going with From There'll Be Blood. I drink your milkshake.
There it is.
I drink it up.
Yeah, very good stuff. Yes.
Who was nursing you, poor Eli? One of Bandit's sows? That land has been had. Nothing you can do about it. It's gone. It's had.
If you would just take this lease, Daniel.
Drainage! Drainage! if you have a milkshake, and I have a milkshake, and I have a straw, there it is, that's a straw, you see. Watching. And my straw reaches across the room and starts to drink your milkshake. I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
Don't bully me, Daniel.
First off, like, you see a movie like There'll Be Blood, yeah, and a quote like that just comes out of left field. It's like, it's funny, it's tragic, it's frightening, it's dramatic, it's everything, like, from a genre standpoint, and it perfectly sums up the monster that this character has become. So thematically it works, but just like the quote itself, like, who says something like that? And how do you think of something like that? But it makes so much sense for this kind of like this business rivalry that's essentially formed between Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday. And I talked a lot about how I think this film is essentially the birth of American capitalism, and their rivalry almost kind of mirrors like the essence of business competition to the extreme. Yeah. But it's almost kind of almost a satirical look at it when you look at this quote, but it adds something to it. So thematically, I love it, but just the quote itself, I cannot wait to get the chance to say this to somebody and mean it and absolutely mean it. So
I feel like the only way you'd ever say it though is like if you actually drink somebody's milkshake. Like if you're at a diner, they leave to go to the bathroom, it comes back and it's all empty, and then you just say, "I drink your milkshake,"
which they did that on an SNL sketch before.
Yeah,
when the movie came out, Bill Hader was giving a commercial about a diner that he owned called "I Drink Your Milkshake," where all he does is just walk up to his guests and drink their milkshakes. It was one of the few funny sketches they've done in years, but that's my opinion. But
low blow.
I'm sorry.
That's a good scene though, and coming from you, Brendan, that is not too surprising. It's a great one, great pick.
What can I say? I'm predictable.
Yeah, it's good. Hey, my number one is going to be pretty predictable too for those that know me. But you know, I kept this personal. You know, when I was looking at Casablanca, that's a personal choice of mine, especially in connection with my wife. Field of Dreams, I've talked about quite a bit as well. And my number one, Brendan, is not going to surprise you as well. Now, I could have gone a more fun route, because who doesn't like a May the Force be with you, right? Or even me personally, I'll say to anybody any day of the week, Autobots roll out, because I'm Optimus Prime. So
I say that all the time.
Yeah, me too, exactly.
You wish you were Optimus Prime.
I am.
You're more like Bumblebee.
Maybe the child that has goofy personality.
Yeah, that's it.
The immature one. No, for my number one, I went a little bit deeper, a little bit more meaningful, I guess, than the fun picks. And for my number one, I'm going with Rosebud from Citizen Kane, of course. And what I like about this one is kind of like how you were talking about, Brennan, in terms of how it plays into that character and how it plays into the film's themes is obviously crucial, and what it meant to that character and how nobody ever found out about it and how he kind of lost his innocence. And the whole film was really about these investigators searching the meaning of that word, which was really just him trying to get back his childhood in a lot of ways. And it's heartbreaking. It's utterly heartbreaking. I actually put this on, we did a top 3 with heartbreaking scenes, I believe, on a previous show. And I had this in there because for me, it's so tragic and it really speaks to me. And I think the way that Orson Welles pieces that whole film together, it's obviously great for a lot of reasons that we've talked about on our extra film when we reviewed that, Brendan. But you know what it meant though to that character, it just really spoke volumes to me. I don't think that movie is as highly regarded as it is because of its technical genius, especially for its time. That's certainly a part of it. But this script, I think, is impeccable, and I love every moment of it. And for that, Rosebud makes my number one.
It's absolutely tragic too.
It is,
but it helps address a theme for that film that I think it's personal for everyone. I mean, if you don't relate to it, then there's something wrong with you. And at least that's the way I see it, and because it goes back and deals with, you know, coming of age and losing childhood, and that's
exactly.
I don't want to say any more for the sake of spoilers, but if you haven't seen Citizen Kane, again, there's something wrong with you.
It came out in the 40s. How have you not seen it? I mean, you're giving a spoiler alert for a movie that's very old. This isn't Terminator Genisys. This came out a very long time ago.
I'm always inclined for that because we may have some listeners that may have not seen it yet. And I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. But you're absolutely right. If you haven't seen this movie, I mean, that's your first homework assignment from this podcast. Go watch Citizen Kane.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because I even know some cinephiles, let alone just average moviegoers, that hasn't seen this. And even though it's an old movie, and you make a good point, Colin, that this is just one of those movies that shouldn't ever be spoiled. Like if you can go into it fresh and not knowing anything, you're going to have, hopefully you'll have a wonderful experience with it. So for me, it's just one of those untouchables. I know I wouldn't ever spoil this for anybody, regardless of how old it is. So that being said, Colin, any honorable mentions you want to talk about real fast?
I had a few. I had It's a Trap from Star Wars. I had You're Killing Me Smalls from Sandlot. And then I had Inconceivable from Princess Bride.
Okay. Yeah, very nice.
Nice.
Yeah, what about you, Brendan?
So I also had You're Killing Me Smalls, and I also had There's No Crying in Baseball, as I mentioned earlier. But I had 4 others. One that I have been mentioning quite a lot on these past couple shows, JD, is that's Chaos Theory.
Yeah, that's a good one.
From Jurassic Park. I've said that quite often. You have the great classic from Taxi Driver, You Talking to Me?
Yeah.
You Talking to Me? I've said that in real life before. The scariest one on my list. Exactly, yeah. If you haven't said that again, there's something. I got to keep saying there's something wrong with people.
Things like what you were talking about with Casablanca is like, even if you haven't seen Taxi Driver, you know that quote. And so
exactly.
if you saw Taxi Driver for the first time, you'd be like, oh my God, this is where that line's from.
Yeah.
Exactly. You've got a very frightening quote from a movie like Marathon Man. I don't know if you guys have seen that, where Laurence Olivier goes, "Is it safe? Is it safe?" Very frightening quote. And lastly, I didn't put this on my list because it made a recent list of ours a few weeks ago, JD. And every time I call a claim on something that I want for myself, I always go, mine. But I recently had that as a top 3 Pixar moment for me. So for that reason, I left it off my list. But still one of the funniest moments from any Pixar film for me.
Yeah, no, that's a really good pick as well, Brendan. As far as honorable mentions, obviously I mentioned Star Wars and my Transformers one. Yippee-ki-yay I had on there as well. I'm going to make him an offer you can't refuse is a good one. Hey, you guys. From the Goonies. You Talking to Me, I also had on there. How about I Feel the Need for Speed from Top Gun. And I also had, my last one, I had Forget It, Jake. It's Chinatown, which was very close. I've talked about that one a lot, though, in the show as well, at least that movie. So I kept that one off, but it's pretty interchangeable between that and I think Citizen Kane for me. It was pretty close for it making my list as well.
That one from Chinatown came up pretty recently on a discussion, too.
Yeah, it did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a good one.
And then real fast before we move on, because I brought this up to my wife earlier today, and she was having a blast with this because I don't know why, but she never really gets into our show. She never listens to it. But she's like, oh, I want to have a top 3. And so she sent me these, and I told her I'd read it on air, so I'm going to because, I like to stay married. So she had...
I'm scared. I'm scared.
This is what she had. She had, and I think you guys will like them. She had Life is Like a Box of Chocolates from Forrest Gump.
Obvious. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
She had Goonies Never Say Die from the Goonies, of course.
Okay. Good.
Just Keep Swimming from Finding Nemo.
Good.
And then E.T. Phone Home from E.T. So that was her 4.
Okay.
Not bad.
I'm a little on that one, even though E.T. is probably my top 10 favorite movies of all time. But that's a beautiful quote.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and for her, I'll give her credit. So she picked a movie that was from the 80s. So good for her.
Good job, Brandy. We're all proud of you.
Anyway, that's all that we had for our honorable mentions this week.
All right, well, let us know how your picks out there stack up against ours. You can let us know by emailing us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com, or you can leave us a comment on Facebook or Twitter, or on our website at InSessionFilm.com.
All right, guys, before we move on, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad, okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
All right, guys, for our poll this week, of course, leading up to Terminator Genisys, we asked, which Terminator film do you prefer? The Terminator or Terminator 2 Judgment Day? And then I left in a write-in option for anybody that had the gall to write in Terminator 3, or, if people even acknowledge that salvation exists.
Salvation's not that bad. It's not.
Hey, Colin's going to go for it. So, hey, that's fine.
It really isn't.
Well,
Genisys is only slightly better than it, okay?
That's another debate for another time, I think. So, as for the results of the poll, actually, I guess before we do that, Colin, which one do you prefer, the first one or Terminator 2?
Oh, I'm definitely a Terminator 2 guy, because for me, one of the weaker points in the Terminator, which it has very few of, is that Sarah Connor was kind of annoying. Yeah, and in Terminator 2, it just skips out on that, and she's already a badass, and it's just more enjoyable.
And that's fair. I think I like the arc, though, of what she goes through in the first one. And for those that listened to our extra film this last week, you'll know that Brendan and I would vote for Terminator 2, although I think Terminator, the first one, is a solid pick. For me, it's just slightly behind Terminator 2. And that's kind of how the results fare, too. And it was very, very close, but winning with 55% of the vote was Terminator 2. 42% of the vote was the first Terminator. So it was very, very close. And then we had one write-in that just said none of them, which I can't fathom. But, if you don't like them, hey, it's not for everybody. And that's perfectly fair. So, but anyway, thanks to everyone that voted on the poll. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. We really do appreciate your responses and your participation in our polls like that. It's very good fun. But anyway, speaking of good fun, coming up next, we're going to be continuing our discussion segment called InSession Film Showdown, where JD and myself are going to go head-to-head talking about the Jurassic franchise versus the Terminator franchise.
Bring it on.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, just want to pause for a quick second to say a huge thank you to everyone that is supporting the show. And if you want to help support us, there's a couple ways that you can help us out. One, you'll notice that we have some fun bonus content on our website for just a small donation of 99 cents. They actually are free to listen to on the site, but we do encourage and appreciate a small donation as we do run it on an honor system. And last week on the show for episode 123, we did another edition of Settling the Score with Mark Herney, and we talked about James Horner and did a fun little podcast honoring him and his awesome, great music. So definitely go and check that out if you haven't. Another way to help us out is via PayPal. Very simple. On our site at InSessionFilm.com/donate, you'll see a PayPal button there, and you can either do a one-time donation or you can sign up for a monthly subscription, $1, $3, or $5 per month, whatever you want to sign up for. All of that information is there and available. And of course, we are also available on Patreon at patreon.com. And Patreon's great because it's a way for you to earn free stuff while supporting us. So if you want to sign up for, let's say, $1 per show, you can do that, and we'll review a film of your choice by signing up for that level. And there's several different levels, and the higher the level, the more free stuff you'll get in the process. Again, you can find all of that information at patreon.com/InSessionFilm.
And that sounds like the greatest gift of all, getting to hear us talk about what movie you want us to talk about.
Exactly.
I think that's because we may trash it. And
I wouldn't, but Brendan might.
Yeah, well, I'm honest. But anyway, there's a lot of great stuff that you can get from Patreon. But at the same time, there's some great stuff you can also get from the InSession Film Store, which is another great way to support us. Perhaps you want a really cool item like a mug or a tie or an iPhone case with our logo right on there. Great way to help market us and support us as well. But we'll also be able to customize something for you if you don't see an item on there that you would like. But just don't ask for something so overly futuristic that we need Skynet to help us travel to the like. Don't ask for like a flying car with the InSession Film race car logo on it or anything like that.
Yes.
Which would be really awesome. We should think about doing that. JD. We should think about that.
Yeah.
But that's a great way to support us. And for those who have ordered some collateral from there, we really already appreciate that. Lastly, we are also sponsored by Audible.com. And with Audible, you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial by going to www.audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. And here you have over 150,000 titles for you to read and choose from. And they're all working for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or your MP3 player, whatever your smart device may be. Perhaps you want to catch up on the latest Star Wars collateral or the latest Marvel collateral in the subject of sci-fi, as we talked about with Terminator. A lot of great sci-fi in there for you to pick from. But you'll also be supporting us at the same time. Another great way to support us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and even just a subscription to iTunes or a review on iTunes goes a long way, or even a like on Facebook or a follow on Twitter. No matter what you do, we really do appreciate everyone's support.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan. And we are Talking in Circles.
Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as Geekcast Radio's newest edition. And as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom.
We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions. We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at geekcastradio.com.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 124, and now we're going to be continuing a segment we call InSession Film Showdown.
No. You gotta listen to the way people talk. You don't say affirmative or some shit like that. You say, no problemo. And if someone comes up to you with an attitude, you say, eat me. And if you want to shine them on, it's hasta la vista, baby.
Hasta la vista, baby.
All right, guys, for this segment, as Brendan was talking about at the beginning of the show, one of us is going to be battling for Jurassic Park and that franchise, and then the other one is going to be talking about the Terminator franchise, and Colin is going to come in and tell me that I won. So Brendan is going to be fighting for Jurassic Park. I'm going to be fighting for Terminator. Brendan, tell us why the first Jurassic Park movie is great, and then how you're going to lose the rest of this battle.
Well, because that's chaos theory. That's why I'm going to win this battle.
Fair enough.
That's all I have to say about that.
Yes, nice.
Oh, reference our own top three.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, the main reason why I am going to... Okay, and I'm going to try hard not to be too friendly about this, JD, because last time we did this kind of showdown, we were way too nice to each other.
Okay.
But no, it just makes it more fun when we're not, because the thing is, you've got two phenomenal films in your lump to kind of talk about.
I do.
Which the Jurassic Park franchise, I'm going to acknowledge, doesn't have that. It's got one great film. But I've got two reasons why I've got to argue for the Jurassic Park franchise. One, and maybe this is a personal pick, but who doesn't love that feeling of childhood nostalgia? I think that's one of the main reasons why I've got to go for this franchise. And also the essence that these films can thrill and inspire awe overall. Not all films do in this franchise do this, but especially the first one. But it's a film for everyone. It really is. And I think a lot of people, almost anyone, can find joy in this first film. And I think as many problems as Jurassic World has, that nostalgia and that joy is captured there, and it helps you make you feel like a kid again. I think the middle two films don't quite have that. I think at the same time, I think this franchise is overall, quality-wise, more consistent than the Terminator franchise overall, because I don't think The Lost World is as terrible as people say. It's not a very good movie. I think it's still better than Jurassic Park 3, which is not that good. However, yeah, JD, you can't cheat and disclude Terminator Salvation from your list, okay? Because
don't worry. I have a whole section of notes for that, okay?
Okay.
Actually, that's a lie, but don't worry. I will talk about it. Don't you worry.
I was so looking forward. Now I'm not disappointed, because I think that's going to help me out more.
Don't you worry. I got something.
Okay. I can't wait to hear it. But the other argument I have is the Terminator franchise has Terminator Salvation, which is a garbage film. And it's a film that, even included with Terminator 3 and now with Genisys, I think people could be very frustrated by how it thematically keeps flipping its coin. It's something that we kind of like, but I think it's something that a lot of people don't like. But at times it does frustrate me too. I think there's a lot of inconsistencies with the Terminator franchise that the Jurassic Park franchise does not have.
Well, you make some good points, Brendan, but, I think when it
Thank you, we're done. Give me the bow. Give me a bow.
I think, though, there's a lot to talk about with the Terminator franchise, and you're talking about inconsistencies. That first Jurassic Park is a masterpiece. We all know that. It is a terrific movie. You think that The Lost World isn't necessarily as bad? I think it's Spielberg's worst movie outside of Indiana Jones 4. I think it is atrocious. Now, there are scenes in that movie, like the RV scene that I talked about during our Jurassic World podcast, that's very good. I think it's one of the best of the entire series, actually. But that movie overall is atrocious. 3, at least, is in the middle of the road, and it's okay. But the second one is terrible. And for Jurassic World, as I talked about on that show, as nostalgic as it is and as fun as it is, I think it's a bad movie without the nostalgia. That movie doesn't work at all. But there are parts of Jurassic World that are fun. They do encompass what made the first film so great in a lot of ways. And because of the nostalgia, I had fun with that movie. Outside of that, though, that plot is very thin. The acting in some parts of that movie is very bad, much like we talked about with Genisys, and I'll get to that in a second. But I don't think the Jurassic Park franchise overall has even come close, not even come close to matching that first Jurassic Park movie. With Terminator, there's no doubt that Judgment Day, the second one, is one of the best action sci-fi movies of all time. It is absolutely wonderful. Sarah Connor is one of the most badass female characters of all time, as we talked about on the extra film. And what she goes through with her son in that movie, even the father-son relationship aspects in that movie, thematically it's very strong, and it just comes together as close to a masterpiece for a sci-fi film as you can get, I think. And the first Terminator movie, I don't think is far behind as a horror thriller almost. It is wonderful. Now, it's a little bit different in tone than Terminator 2, but for fans that like these horrific, haunting thrillers, you're going to get that in the first Terminator, and it is great. And even though some people may find Sarah Connor a little annoying, as Colin was talking about, I think by the end of the movie, she becomes that slasher film heroine, and she shows a little strength, and she has a little bit more of an arc than I feel like we typically get in slasher films. And I think there's more there. And on top of that, we were talking about how Arnold gives a really great stoic and emotionless performance. He was perfect for that character, and it works out really great. So those first two films are absolutely wonderful. Terminator 3, I know it's a little polarizing. I liked it more than most people do. I think it is middle of the road, but I would take it over The Lost World any day of the week. I may even take it over Jurassic Park 3 even. I think it's a decent film for what it's doing. I like the ending more than you do as well, Brendan. Salvation. I do think this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. But you know what? We have a person on our podcast that is smarter than me and that likes Salvation.
Wait, it says perhaps, who? No offense, Colin, it says who?
Says me.
Hey, I love you, man. Okay, that was rude. Keep going, JD.
And Colin makes great points for Salvation. While I may hate that film, there's probably smarter people like Colin that like it enough that it's okay. So if people are aligned that boat and they like Terminator 3 as well, at least the lesser parts of the Terminator franchise are still better than the lesser parts of the Jurassic Park franchise. And in my mind, it's not even a goddamn debate. It is easily Terminator, and nothing has come close in the Jurassic Park franchise from that first movie. Once Spielberg gets back on board and directs another movie close to that, you can come talk to me, Brennan. Until then, I'm going to be sitting here sipping a margarita and watching Terminator.
Well, you know, if Spielberg comes back, we'll see what happens. He won't come back. He won't come back, though. But just like James Cameron probably won't come back, regardless of him reacquiring the rights.
Oh, he's coming back. He's coming back.
Well, you know, if he had
busy with Avatar sequels.
Well, if he had
he's
great
going to be doing that for the rest of his life.
He could be. That is true.
He's got some other films like Battle Angel and some other things on side for that. But you know what? We didn't hate Genisys as much as other people said, but he seemed to really like Genisys. But if that's what he considers quality in these Terminator films, I don't want him coming back. So I think if you forecast the future, I think the Terminator franchise is much more doomed than the potential of the Jurassic Park franchise, which is another reason why I think.
Sorry to cut you off, but even Spielberg, as much as I love Spielberg, I still think Lost World is an awful film and one of his worst for sure.
Well, so does he.
Heavily produced Jurassic World, which again, outside of the nostalgia, I don't think is super great. So I don't even know if he produced the Transformers film, for crying out loud. So I don't know how much weight I hold on that. Yeah, exactly.
What is his role as a producer? Like, what does an executive producer really do?
I don't know. I've argued that for a long time. I don't even know if they do anything. But before we go any further, I do want to bring Colin on because we are arguing a lot. So Colin, let's bring you into this conversation, and you be the judge and jury. Which one is better, Terminator or Jurassic Park?
First of all, if you look at Salvation as a fan-made movie, it's like 10 times better. So
interesting.
You should definitely do that.
Okay.
I gotta say something quickly. Then I'm sorry to cut you off. You know who is really smart, JD? That also hates Terminator Salvation? Christian Bale.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people hate that movie, but you know,
I just had to say. Anyway, keep going, Colin. I'm sorry.
All right, so you guys both made some really good points as to why each other are wrong, but
that's how we roll.
Yeah, so I feel like it definitely comes down to what you guys are talking about with nostalgia. In that Jurassic Park, if you go back to it, you still have that childhood nostalgia, and even Jurassic World, you still filled up with the nostalgia of remembering Jurassic Park, and so that was a big point. But then with Terminator, it's a legitimate fact that Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 are two of the greatest sci-fi movies almost ever made.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's close. But right now I'm leaning towards JD just because I feel like he got out there and took out Lost World and 3 because they're the worst. Both of them are just
they are terrible. Yes.
And
the first half of Lost World is actually not bad. It's not that bad.
It's kind of bad.
It's not that bad. It has some decent characters. I like the characters in it. That's about it. But
there's some scenes that work well, but
it's not Spielberg's worst movie. It's not worse than War of the Worlds.
Oh,
War of the Worlds is not that bad either.
Yeah, I agree.
War
with
of the
that.
Worlds can suck it.
No, Lost World's way worse than War of the Worlds.
Disagree.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all know Indy 4 is the worst, but outside of that, we're not talking about that. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, in this world, Salvation exists. Indy 4 does not.
Okay, well, and that's fair, but still, outside of that, you still have two of the worst films of this. And Terminator 1 and 2, clearly two of the best. 3 is okay. And you even want to compare that to Jurassic World, which, is okay, middle of the road. A lot of people are split down the middle for that one as well, so you're kind of even there. So
personally,
there's no. If you're ticking down the sides, Terminator's looking pretty good right now.
I still think Jurassic World is a little bit better than just the nostalgia. I think there's some good things in there that we're not giving enough credit to, but that is just me. I think a lot of other people do recognize that aside from the nostalgia, there are some good qualities in Jurassic World as a reason why people keep going to see it. I don't think it's only just because of the nostalgia. So I think we do at least have, you can argue, at least 2 good films in the Jurassic Park franchise. But that's just me.
I'll give it 1.5.
Oh, you're too cruel. You're too cruel.
Okay, even if you want to consider it good, it's nowhere near, not even close to Terminator 1 and 2. So
no crap. I mean, I'm not going to refute that argument.
So, yeah, your second best film is really hurting you. I mean, my middle of the road movies, like my third and fourth pick, are where your number 2 is. So you're hurting there, Brendan. So
I don't think I am.
Any other thoughts?
You're kind of hurting.
Yeah, there you go. Anything you want to add, Colin?
Yeah, it's just like what you said about Terminator is that like Terminator 3, which I think is a terrible movie, has some great moments specifically towards the very end of the movie, and I actually really like the ending, but I basically hate all of it. And Salvation, I think, is okay, but I can totally understand why people think it's garbage, because there's a lot of absolute trash in it, like just some really bad stuff. But at the end of the day, I just feel like with Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, there's no redeeming qualities to Jurassic Park 3 for me. And Lost World, it's okay just at the start, but then it just gets weird, and Vince Vaughn is in it, and it's
Vince Vaughn's good in it. I like Vince Vaughn.
No, he's not.
I don't hate him in that movie either, honestly.
For me, I just see like Vince Vaughn being the comedic relief of that movie, and it's just the worst. Like, it's not like he's doing a drama like True Detective, which he's great in, because he can definitely act, but he's just not good in that movie.
Yeah.
But I just feel like Jurassic Park 3 has no redeeming qualities, while Terminator 3 and Salvation have some redeeming qualities. Even though you guys seem to think Salvation doesn't, I think you're wrong, and it definitely does.
And he's smarter than both of us, Brendan, so there you go.
Yeah, damn right.
I would argue that too, but anyway. We're not here to call each other stupid. That's too mean.
I agree.
That's why I'm here. What do you think I'm here for? That's all I'm here for.
We got to have you on the show more often.
Yeah. Fair. All right, Brendan, any other final thoughts? Let's nail this in the coffin.
Win me over, Brendan. Yeah. Come on.
Last arguments.
I'm done.
He says. Hey, that's a terrible.
Well, and JD wins.
Yes, and I win. Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah.
So my final thoughts. So, I guess a lot of this argument was actually I'm gonna admit something here, and essentially I guess I'm gonna have to admit defeat. A lot of this was based on forecasting. Okay, based on speculation and prediction that Genisys was going to be absolute garbage. Because I will say, if you had Genisys as a garbage film, just like Salvation, which is a garbage film, you would have had 2 garbage films in one franchise that Jurassic Park I don't think has. But
Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, though.
No. There's at least some good qualities in the world, and I will pull at least a few good qualities outside of Jurassic Park 3, even though it's a pretty bad film. It has Sam Neill. Sam Neill's good, and he's always good.
He's not good in that, though.
No, he's good in that. He has moments. He makes it fun. He makes aspects fun.
Yeah.
But I was, in many ways, I was actually really hoping I would have absolutely despised Terminator Genisys, which would have been the major bulk of my argument, saying that JD, your films have 2 phenomenal films, 1 middle of the road film, and then 2 trash.
Yeah,
But unfortunately, we found some things in Genisys that I kind of liked, and I'm saying, how am I saying the word unfortunate and liking a film in the same sentence together?
I know.
But I can't deny, JD, that you have got 2 of the greatest sci-fi films ever made on your list, and my list has 1 of them. You've got 40%, I've got 25%. Yeah. But I will still say that I like Jurassic World more than you, but I also like a lot of things about it outside of just the nostalgia. And I think there are obviously those out there that agree with you and those that agree with me. It's very polarizing, but I do think there are good qualities of that film outside of just the nostalgia.
Sure.
But that's my best argument. My best argument is that you've got the 2 greatest sci-fi films of all time on your list.
Yeah, well, and it's not a bad argument. And of course, a lot of this is very subjective too, because I agree with you, Brendan, that I like Jurassic Park 3 a lot more than the second one. And I would also agree.
I don't agree with that, but
well,
I don't either.
I think it's a lot better than 2, but I'm not saying 3 is great. I'm just saying it's better than 2. And I would also agree that Jurassic World has some really great qualities about it, especially in terms of the nostalgia. I just don't think that it has much more than what's there on the surface. And it has one of the worst deaths I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm not going to go into that much. But overall, though, you're right. It really comes down to the first 2 Terminators are just 2 of the best of all time, and everything outside of that is just gonna lie in terms of subjectivity and where you find the middle of the roadness of the rest of these films is depending on just what you feel about certain aspects of those films, and it's very nitpicky stuff at that point. So at least in terms of these kinds of arguments. So that being said, Colin, any other final thoughts, and we'll nail this thing in the coffin?
Yeah, it's just like if you take out what are undisputably the best films in the franchise, so you take out Jurassic Park and then you take out Terminator 1 and 2, I would rather watch Terminator 3, Salvation, and Genisys than Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 and Jurassic World. I like Jurassic World, but I can't stand the Lost World or Jurassic Park 3. They're just the worst.
I'm trying to find a window on my computer to punch you right now.
Well, and it's okay. I mean, we're all gonna like different stuff versus, other things. So, I mean, it's perfectly fine.
This is fun though. I love this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anyway, good segment, guys. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for doing that.
Nothing like a good old friendly debate.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think it turned out to be too friendly.
Hey, we screamed and yelled a lot, so
we did. I think I can't wait to do this again. I'm gonna find another topic and we're gonna go head to head, toe to toe, hand to hand, and Bumblebee to Optimus Prime, if you will.
Okay.
Anyway, everyone out there, let us know if you agree with me or if you agree with JD. I mean, I think I know who you're going to agree with. Me.
Yeah.
Did we just say that at the exact same time?
Not in editing.
Make it happen. Make it happen.
No, I'll keep it.
or out there, just let us know what you thought overall about this InSession Film Showdown that we just did. You can leave us a comment on Facebook or Twitter or email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
All right, well, before we get out of here, first of all, Colin, thanks so much for joining us this week, man.
Oh, thank you guys. It's a blast.
Tell us, once again, where can we find you in your written reviews, and where can we find you on social media?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at DuckIsGod. You can find me on notyet.weebly.com. We are going to buy the domain soon, so don't worry about that. Yeah, exactly. You can also check out my podcast on iTunes that I do with my friend Ben. It's called The Real Cinema Podcast. That is real with 2 E's, like a cinema reel. It's a very clever pun. You should all love it.
Yes, of course.
And that's about it.
Yeah, definitely go give Colin a follow, like I was saying earlier in the show. Really great stuff and fun to talk to on Twitter, as well as the show. Colin, thanks so much for joining us. You're definitely going to have to come back sometime. So
awesome. Thanks.
So that should do it for this week's show. Just a quick reminder, as usual, to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/InSessionFilm. And you can follow us on Twitter at InSessionFilm and on Google Plus and YouTube. Just search InSession Film. And of course, sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that by clicking the newsletter tab on Facebook or on the site at InSessionFilm.com/newsletter.
And for more thoughts on the films that we watch, you can check us out on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. We also try to respond to every piece of email that we get, so you can email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Also, you could subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. Also, leave us a review while you're on iTunes. We'd appreciate some feedback on that medium as well. And lastly, you can check out our Listen Now page, which is on our website at InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And the InSession Film Podcast is supported by our super awesome listeners like you. Once again, if you want to help us, just go to our website at InSessionFilm.com. You can click on our bonus content tab at our main menu to hear our bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. You can check out the InSession Film store or just go to InSessionFilm.com/donate. And you'll see a bunch of information there and how you can help us. One thing that I would highly recommend is checking out our mobile app, where you can hear everything we do under one roof for just a one-time fee of $1.99. You can find that app on the Amazon Market for Android devices, the Windows 8 phone store for Windows devices, and the Podcast Box app for iOS devices. Again, all those details are on the site at InSessionFilm.com/apps. Brendan, what are we doing on the show next week, man?
So next week, we're going to be reviewing a film that came out this week, so we'll be revisiting it a little bit it's been out. But we're going to be going to a bit of a guilty pleasure, I guess. Magic Mike XXL.
That's right.
Or is it extra large?
Well,
I haven't seen the film yet. I know you have, JD.
Yeah. No, and it was a crazy experience. I don't know if you've seen this yet or not, Colin, but when I went to see it, I went with my wife a few days ago, and the theater that I was in was packed out, of course, and I was like one of like maybe 3 guys in the entire thing. But when I was watching it, I had no idea if it was a movie or if I was actually at a strip club, because every woman in the audience was screaming and yelling, and I'm pretty sure they were throwing dollar bills at the TV screen. But it was a crazy experience. It was absolutely nuts. So I think if you can find that, Brendan, it'll make the movie a lot more enjoyable.
I am not going to that by myself. I refuse.
Hey, no shame.
No shame, exactly.
Well, I'll be that creepy guy in the corner, and then they'll probably call security on me thinking, who is this creepy guy sitting in the private corner watching Magic Mike?
Hey, I'll say this. I really liked the first one, actually. And I laughed a lot at this one.
I did too.
First one's really good.
Yeah,
it's very good. It's a great character film. But anyway, we're getting a little off topic. But
we'll talk more about this next week. Yeah,
we will. But for our top 3, I decided, since he's technically retired from filmmaking and because he directed the first Magic Mike, let's do our top 3 favorite Steven Soderbergh films.
I like it.
And
Ocean's 11, Ocean's 11, and Ocean's 11.
Oh,
that's a good one.
I don't even think that'd make my top 3, but that's just me. Anyway. It is a very good film. It's a very good film. But also, before I move on, though, JD, if I'm not mistaken, Steven Soderbergh was the director of photography on Magic Mike XXL. I think he may have been.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
He was.
Was he?
Yeah, he was.
Interesting.
That is so cool. So another reason why we're doing it.
Yeah,
but anyway,
there you
go. With a film like that technically being a guilty pleasure, I decided that we should revisit our InSession Film Confession segment. And we'll talk about some guilty pleasures, some movies that are considered great that we may not like so much. It's in this segment where I admitted that I'm not a huge fan of The Godfather Part 2, which, God help me, people hate me for that comment, but
yeah, I still can't fathom that, but it's okay. It's all subjective.
Yeah, don't hate me yet.
My all-time guiltiest pleasure, Man on a Ledge. 2012.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one either, so there's my confession.
It is so amazing because it's not a great film at all, but I love it so much just because it's actually a really fun movie, and if you can just turn off your brain for that time, it's so much fun. I love it.
I like watching movies like that too, so
I'll
have to check it out sometime. All right, well, before we get out of here, Colin, we'll toss it to you first. Any final thoughts on anything before we leave today?
No, not really. It's all good.
All right, fair enough. What about you, Brendan? Any final thoughts?
Can I just also state that, JD, your wife made you see Magic Mike XXL and you had to miss the USA-Germany game live instead of watch it on DVR?
I recorded it. So
I know, but it's
USA.
Thank you. But it's a sports match. It's
well, like I said earlier, I like to be married, and especially to my wife. So
don't take offense to that.
No, I mean, this was something she was wanting to do, and she goes and sees a lot of the movies that we talk about on the show, and she hates a lot of them. So this was my, giving back to her, so to speak. So. I mean,
you had to sacrifice a lot for that, unfortunately. But anyway, you did get to see the game.
I did get to see it, and I got to avoid spoilers, thankfully. So I did get to watch it, not knowing the outcome. So
wow, unlike most of us with Terminator Genisys.
Yes. So, Which, you know, if you get good at avoiding spoilers once you start doing it for a while, so just stop watching trailers at all costs if you can.
Can't do it. Can't do it.
As far as final thoughts for me, I guess on the soccer note, Brendan, I felt terrible for that girl from England that cost her team a chance to go to the finals because she scored on herself. I don't know if did you see that, Brendan?
I don't want to talk about it. It's too depressing.
Oh, it was heartbreaking.
It's so funny, though. It's so funny. I saw it and I was dying of laughter. I was like, my goodness, this is amazing.
As someone who has played soccer, that is like a phobia of every soccer player is to not accidentally score on your own goal. So I was in pain when I saw it. Oh, I was in so much pain.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brendan. I didn't get to see it live. I just saw the replay and all the aftermath of it. I felt terrible for her. And I mean, I've always played goalie for those sports, so I've never really been in that position before, but man, that's got to suck. Just playing team sports like that. It's got to be the worst feeling in the world, but anyway, we'll wait for the movie to come out about it next year because that's how things seem to be rolling nowadays. So,
directed by Bennett Miller.
Directed by Bennett Miller.
Touche.
That was good. Yes, that was very good. All right. Thanks, Colin, for joining us. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you guys next week. We're getting down and dirty with Magic Mike. We'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast. For the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.